We've all seen the message. John 3, verse 16. God so loved the world. We've seen it on bumper stickers. We've seen it on billboards. Yet when we read the passage on its own, we miss the full context of John's gospel. Specifically, what we don't see is the conflicting themes of strong love and deep-rooted hatred that were present in the first century Christian community. Scripture scholar John Pilch acknowledges that John's community went through a series of stages of development, including excessive use of the word world that really reflects an us versus them mentality. Perhaps, as a community, we are being invited to new levels of awareness and visibility if we are only able to see things at a macro level. What might be invisible to us at this time, in these days, as we face into the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and racism. Although the coronavirus may be visible under a high-powered electron microscope, to most of us, it is invisible. Yet its impact continues to devastate, as more than 394,000 people worldwide died. And we know many others are not counted. Perhaps even more hidden and insidious are the repercussions of racial division and systemic racism in our society. It's easy to be lulled into believing the promise of the American dream, that everyone who works hard will be treated equally and be able to improve his or her standard of living. However, if we peer behind the veil of American exceptionalism, we are exposed to devastating truths. The heartless Memorial Day murder of George Floyd triggered protests across the United States and around the world, coming on the heels of the unjust murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and in combination with decades or centuries of pent-up injustice, we have reached a tipping point. These past 2 weeks have shattered the illusion of equality in this country for me, as they probably have for you. In the words of Bob Dylan, the times, they are a-changing. It has become impossible to deny the systemic and systematic racism that undergirds our society. We are called to conversion. And in the words of Father Brian Massengale, S.J., who teaches theology at Fordham, he describes conversion literally as changing direction, making an about face. I want to highlight 3 stories now. The first is a conversation I had this week with our community treasurer, George. I asked him for an update on the work that he and Mimi are doing at PAR Recycle Works. PAR Recycle Works is a nonprofit electronics recycler that provides transitional employment to formerly incarcerated men. Like many of us who work, their operations were shut down in mid-March, and all the employees were furloughed. Now, when that happened, George and Mimi and members of the board at PAR helped people apply for unemployment, believing the benefits would come quickly. It turned out it was 7 weeks before most people saw payment, their first payment. Really tough for people who live paycheck to paycheck. PAR was able, due to the generosity of their supporters, to supply Acme gift certificates, to negotiate rent deferrals, to pay half the back rent for some of the men. George shared with me that one of our guys was ready to move on. He had actually gotten a good job at the ShopRite at 57th and Parkside in West Philadelphia. He was scheduled to begin. But unfortunately, the entire complex was looted, and now nothing remains. George went on, I don't think I could have appreciated what desperate is until I saw it up close and personal. Mimi and I feel very strained, working to preserve the organization as well as minister to these men. I still have to feel guilty that I've remained otherwise unscathed by this whole affair. Nevertheless, there is much to be said for working and walking in solidarity. So I cannot view the world the same way as I might have without this experience. George went on. As the Jesuits like to say, we are ruined for life. I get the sense what George means is that his illusion of equality in the world has been shattered. The second example I want to share today was a moving article that was written by Lori Lakin Hutcherson, entitled, What I Said When My White Friend Asked for My Black Opinion on White Privilege. Hutcherson writes, when we started getting our college acceptances, senior year of high school, I remember some white male classmates were pissed that another Black classmate had gotten into UCLA, and they didn't. They said that affirmative action had given him their spot, and it wasn't fair. This was an actual friend of theirs, a guy who'd worked their ass off. The point here is, if you've never been on the receiving end of the assumption that when you've achieved something, it's only because it was taken away from a white person who deserved it, that is white privilege. When I was at Harvard in my freshman college tutorial, our small group of 4 or 5 were assigned to read Thoreau, Emerson, Malcolm X, Joseph Conrad, Dreiser, etc. When it was the week to discuss the autobiography of Malcolm X, one white boy boldly claimed he couldn't even get through it because he couldn't relate and didn't think he should be forced to read it. I don't remember the exact words I said, but I remember the feeling. I think it's what doctors refer to as chandelier pain. As soon as a sensitive area on a patient is touched, they shoot through the roof. That's what I felt. I said something like, my whole life I've had to read things that don't have anything to do with me or that I can relate to. But I find a way anyway, because that's what learning is about. Trying to understand other people's perspectives. The point here is the canon of literature studied in the United States, as well as the majority of television and movies, has focused primarily on the works or achievements of white men. So if you've never considered or experienced how damaging it is, was, or could be to grow up without myriad role models and images in school that reflect you in your reading material or in the mainstream media, that is white privilege. I urge all of you to read the full article when you have time. My third example highlights two recommendations from Joan Chittister. She recommends, and I quote, evaluate, re-educate, and rebuild a police force that is as humane and even-handed as we pretend it is. And Joan goes on, we must not let our private personal selves off the hook. We are killing one fatal virus by wearing masks and practicing social distance. We can kill the virus of racism if we begin to practice social outreach across racial lines. By doing nothing but talking, we are the carriers of the disease of racism. Every family, every white person in this country needs to reach out and make a Black friend. One who comes to our houses and eats at our tables, who attends our parties. End quote. Each of us has the responsibility to take action, to move out of our comfort zone. It is in sharing the good news with others that we spread knowledge, break the ignorance barrier, shine the light, and begin to change the world. There are tons of resources available. Recognize that racism passes invisibly from generation to generation, and that shifting patterns, even beginning, is really uncomfortable. Shameful even for many of us. Looking for a place to begin though, these are a few of my favorite resources. If you're having trouble understanding your role in this system, consider reading White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, or How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. If you want to learn more, let me suggest reading Between the World and Me by Tanahashi Coates, or reread The Letter from a Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King Jr., or the biography of Malcolm X. If you prefer to watch and learn, consider the movies The 13th, The Hate You Give, and Just Mercy. There's also a good docuseries on Netflix, When They See Us. This past Thursday evening, Interfaith Philadelphia and the City of Philadelphia's Office of Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs jointly sponsored an interfaith vigil entitled Bearing Witness. I was one of 250 faith-based people on that call. And I want to conclude my comments today with the final blessing from that vigil, which came from a viral Instagram post. Some are posting on social media. Some are protesting in the streets. Some are donating silently. Some are educating themselves. Some are having tough conversations with family and friends. A revolution has many lanes. Be kind to yourself and to others who are traveling in the same direction. Just keep your foot on the gas. Black lives matter.